The Nature of Combat, 2 interviews and a historiographical review. Hello everyone and welcome to my slidecast. I will be analyzing combat warfare of the First World War and comparing it to modern warfare. Along the way, I will be talking to Florence Brown, a British soldier from the First World War, and David Henderson, a Canadian soldier from the Afghanistan War. The slidecast is organized into 3 segments. The first is an in-depth look at trench warfare in the First World War through the monologue of Florence. The second segment looks at modern military perceptions by high school students and David. Lastly, I will sum up the historical viewpoints from both periods, with a focus on the historiographical significance of combat. I will look at subtopics such as women in the war and soldier psyche. My thesis is, the nature of combat has stayed the same for women in the war and soldier psyche. However, intelligence acquisition, conditions of the warfront, and enlistment strategies have changed dramatically.
Introduction. In the First World War, the British and French soldiers fought against Germany on the Western Front. The Triple Entente, which consisted of England, France, and Russia, sought to battle the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. This war was inevitable because of the boiling tension between European countries before the First World War. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, by Gavrilo Princip sparked the war. Numerous battles took place on the Western Front, the 700-kilometer line between Switzerland and Belgium. One of the key characteristics of war on the Western Front were trenches, 6-foot-tall continuous dugouts that defined the front lines. It is said that the soldiers who fought in the trenches experienced some of the most harsh conditions during the war. The war reached an ultimate stalemate where no significant attack advanced either side. In this segment, I will be exploring the role of the soldier in trench warfare of the First World War. The participation of Britain in the war prompted citizens to help the war effort in any way possible. While men were encouraged to enlist, women worked non-traditional jobs in factories and hospitals. Everyone did their part to support their country in the war. What follows is a viewpoint of Florence Brown, a British soldier on leave from the war.
Why join the war effort as a soldier in the first place? It's a man's job. It is my duty to fight for my country. I don't want to be like the cowards that sit at home and receive white feathers from the ladies. What do you do when all your friends join a cause? You get on board. Fighting with your friends on the front line, having 3 meals a day, and receiving military experience? What more can you ask for? After seeing Lord Kitchener's call for soldiers in my classroom, it encouraged me and my best friends to enlist and start the adventure. Even though some of my friends were 17 years old, they lied about their age and went to war. Why? Because every man counts and our country needs us.
Florence touched on the main motivators for men to enlist in the war. The role of the soldier in society was regarded as prestigious, since soldiers were courageous enough to risk their lives to win the war. Though numerous soldiers were killed during the war, their status in society remained the same. Lord Kitchener's poster resulted in the enlistment of many men. The characteristic pose with the pointing finger and the direct message describes a personal connection between every man in England and Lord Kitchener. The new army consisted of a PAL system that encouraged men to join with their friends, classmates, and teammates. Lord Kitchener's intention was to form an army of 1 million men. Before this contribution, the British Expeditionary Force was not strong enough to fight in the Battle of the Somme. More than 1 million men answered Lord Kitchener's call, far exceeding the expectation and military capacity of England. The enlistment of numerous men further increased the respect for soldiers in society, thus bringing prestige to the status of the soldier in the First World War. The previous description of white feathers given by Florence explains the humiliation felt by men who did not enlist in the war. The white feather was placed on a man by women to signify the perceived cowardice by society. It was felt that every man should be fighting on the front lines and doing their part for the war effort. The white feather represented the negative outlook on these men while enforcing the positive stereotype of soldiers in society. A positive motivator to join the war was receiving 3 meals a day. Some men that enlisted did not even have this luxury back home. Others saw enlisting as an opportunity to join an adventure with their friends, not realizing the harsh reality of war. Furthermore, some soldiers received health care that they could not afford at home. Since the soldiers fighting on the front lines required reinforcements in terms of food, supplies, and ammunition, women on the home front and men on the rear of the battlefield provided support within their roles.
Did the war meet my expectation? The trenches were like nothing I'd ever seen before. Rats everywhere, eating fallen soldiers, rotting food, wet, dirty puddles everywhere, the obnoxious stench. On top of that, you had to attack opposing trenches and sometimes raid them. Innocent deaths of surrendering prisoners, us not knowing what to do with them. So yeah, the war was not what I expected.
The description given by Soldier Florence was typical of the poor living conditions inside the trenches. Because of the small space, soldiers were often in close proximity with fallen comrades. Lice were widespread throughout the trenches, and rats were found everywhere. The putrid stench affected the soldiers' perception of food, water, and their stations, a negative aspect of war that lingered no matter what. Soldiers were given a waterproof sheet to stay dry, though most of the time they used it to lie on the ground and protect themselves from the mud. These poor living conditions were nothing like what the naive soldiers were expecting, which further adds to the glorification of the role of the soldier in society. With the imminent stalemate and the lack of military orders, soldiers became restless. Out of boredom, they would sometimes raid opposing trenches. Trenches were continuous dugouts connected to form a tunnel pattern for cover. They had a zigzag pattern to eliminate enemy fire in a straight path, which would expose all defensive soldiers within the trench. Trench raiding was appealing, as the soldier had direct control over his life. He would gain intel, supplies, and even prisoners of war under no specific orders. When moving forward under military orders, the purpose of a trench attack was to take over the opposing trench and advancing the attacking position. Trench attacks were characterized by bravely going over the top and securing a position within enemy lines. In many instances, attacking soldiers did not know if the opposing soldier was surrendering or setting a trap. This caused confusion and wrongful deaths. Prisoners of war were to be escorted to the rear, but because there were no rules of war defining their treatment, some prisoners would become injured, harmed, or killed, even though they were surrendering. In the attempt to be useful and not to get killed, some German POWs became stretch-bearers. Sometimes, soldiers that escorted POWs would kill them based on hatred or revenge. The hectic feelings surrounding these situations further stressed the fact that soldiers did not know what to expect in the war.
How did the war affect me? It was a total country effort. We all got involved in any way we could. If you were lucky enough to come back, though, you would be haunted by dreams of your comrades dying. At the same time, you had the urge to go back and kill, avenge our soldiers. That hunger still lingers.
The First World War saw a total involvement of the population towards a victorious goal. Women worked in ammunition factories and served as nurses in the rear. The support given by the home front became the foundation for the men fighting on the front lines. The national goal to win the war kept spirits high, yet the numerous deaths tormented the soldiers' conscience. Soldiers were constantly troubled by the visions of war, which included heavy artillery, dismemberment, and ultimately death. Nothing could prepare them for the realities of war. This caused nightmares and recurred even after the war. Everyone witnessed some form of death while serving for their country, whether it was from direct combat or from illness. Even children experienced the harsh realities of war when they lost family members to combat. Soldiers on leave were eager to return to the front lines and kill again,